In this video, you're going to create a basic Flexbox. The Flexbox is going to be a container containing flexible items. So to start, I created a div and I gave it a class container. So this is going to be our future Flexbox. So inside this div, I'm going to create a few divs, which will be our future flexible items or flex items. So at the moment, these divs are just stacked one on top of the other and they don't have any styling. So let's go ahead and add some styling to our elements so that things become clear. So first of all, we are going to make sure that the dimensions of any box includes the border and padding. So this will give us an easy way of sizing our elements later on. So to do this, I'm going to select all elements using the star, and then I'm going to use the box sizing property, which I'm going to set to border box. So if you do this, the size of any div or any box is going to be including the padding and border. All right, now let's style our container. So let's give it a background color. So I'm going to go for a specific color, which is going to be 07575B, like that. And I'm going to give the container a height of 200 pixels, for example. And I can add a margin as well of 10 pixels. Now let's move to the inner divs. So we're gonna go to the container and then greater than sign div. So we're selecting all divs inside the class container. So first of all, let's give our divs a background color. So I'm gonna go for a specific color here, which is going to be 66A5AD. All right. Also, let's center our text using the align text or text align property. And also, let's add some padding. And let's add some margin as well so that we can see limits between our different divs. Let's change the color of the text. So let's go for a blue color or Alice blue, like that. Perfect. And let's add a border. So let's give it a width of 3 pixels. And let's give it a color. So I'm going to go for a specific color here, C4DFE6. And let's go for a solid style. If you look at the current layout, divs are stacked one on top of the other. This is normal because they are block items. They also take up the full width of their parent container. Since the parent div has a fixed height, once the divs can't fit inside the container, they overflow under the container. And this can be fixed by removing the fixed height of the container like this. Now, we want to keep that because that's going to be important later on when we make these items flexible. All right? Now, imagine that you are in a situation where you want these divs to be laid out horizontally, side by side. You can, for instance, make them float to the left. So if I use the float property and apply it to these divs, then you can see how the new layout looks like. Now each element will take as much width as it needs to fit its content, and the remaining space will stay empty. If the container can't fit all elements, like this, then they will be pushed to a new line. Lines also take as much height as needed to fit the boxes inside them. So you can see all the remaining space underneath. Now, what if you want to make sure lines are fully occupied when it comes to the width, so that no spaces like this are left out on the right and left sides, or the up and bottom sides? Or what if you want to make sure your boxes are centered with equal space left on the sides? Well, you could try to do that using known CSS properties, but Flexbox can help you do that way faster and with only a few lines of CSS. Now let's get rid of the float property and convert our container to a Flexbox. So you can do that by setting the display property to flex. Now you can see that children divs are laid out in an inline way, side by side. You can also see that they stretch vertically to take up the full height of the container, but they only take as much width as needed to fit their inner content. If you set their width using the CSS width property, then they will just have that width. So for example, we can set the width of Facebook to 200 pixels, and that's the width it's going to have. Let's remove that for now. Now let's reduce the width of the container and see what happens. If you reduce the width of the container to the point where the container can't fit our 6 boxes, then they will just overflow to the right, like that. You can avoid that by wrapping them inside the container using the Flex Wrap property. So setting the Flex Wrap property to wrap will make sure a new line is created when the width of the container is not enough to fit all these boxes. And if you create more divs inside your container, then the container is going to create as many lines as needed to wrap your elements. You can also wrap your elements in the reverse order. This will make sure the first line is placed as the bottom of the container. So to do this, you can use the wrap reverse value instead. So you can see that we're starting with the first line as the bottom, then moving to the next line on top of it. The height of the container did not change because it is set using the height property. But you can see that the height of boxes has changed. Basically, the height of the container is distributed equally between the rows or lines containing the children boxes or the flex items. The boxes will stretch vertically to occupy the full height available inside each row. This is the default behavior, but you will see later that you can change that. Now let's go back to the wrap value and let's add more elements inside our Flexbox. So in this scenario, we've got 4 rows in total. So this time the height of the container cannot fit all lines or rows, and any extra lines were pushed outside the container. All right, now let's remove the extra boxes and keep only the initial ones. Now, before going any further, you would need to note that you can control the direction of your flex items. So by default, they are displayed inside their rows from left to right. But you can also show them from right to left, or from top to bottom, or bottom to top. To do this, you would need to use the flex direction property. So let's try it and see what happens. So let's set it to row reverse, for example. And you can see that our items are still arranged horizontally, but this time from right to left. Now the default value is row. And if you set this to column, then your boxes are going to be stacked inside columns instead of rows. So in this scenario, our container created 2 columns to fit all boxes. Now if you change the height of the container to 300 pixels, for example, then you can see that we still have got 2 columns. If we go to 400, then we've got only 1 column, because the height of the container is now enough to fit all boxes in 1 column. Now if I go to 100 pixels or 150, then this time we've got 3 columns. Now the boxes will take the full width available inside each column by default. All right. And again, we've got all these columns created because of the flex wrap property. If we remove that, then we're going to have our boxes stacked one on top of the other, and they will overflow outside the container. So wrapping them in this direction makes sure that the container creates as many columns as possible to fit your flex items inside them. Now, what if we had more boxes inside the container? So you can see that in this scenario, we ended up with 6 columns. Let's add more boxes. We've got 9 columns. And once we can't fit the columns inside the container, then we're going to have extra columns created outside the container. So columns here overflow on the right hand side, while when we were in the row direction, we had rows overflowing at the bottom, like this. Now let's go back to our 6 divs. And let's try another flex direction, which is column reverse. So this one will make sure that boxes are stacked inside columns from bottom to top. So let's go back to a height of 200 pixels for the container. And you can see that Apple comes first at the bottom of the first column. Then boxes are stacked from bottom to top. And again, the flex items take the full width of the column where they are located, but they only take as much height as needed. So if I change, for example, the font size of Facebook to make it smaller, then this box became smaller in height, and we've got some extra remaining space at the top inside this column. Alright, now that you are comfortable creating a Flexbox container and setting its direction as well as wrapping its content, you must be ready to align items inside your container and create beautiful layouts. And that's what you're going to do in the next video.